Hey guys, welcome back to my podcast, Relatable Relationships. Today in this episode we will be talking about how to deal with issues. To start out, something I've learned as I went through a long distance relationship is that a lot of issues don't even arise until you've been together in person. And even then, some issues don't come up until a year or two into your relationship, or even until after you've been married for some time. What you do need to note especially is that you need to note these issues as soon as possible. I know, it sucks. No one likes confrontation and talking about the nitty-gritty, but it needs to be done. Otherwise, these things will continue to drag on and on and on, and it can start to build up resentment towards that person. Or it all of a sudden becomes a bigger problem and harder to stop. I've seen it hurt marriages and cause unnecessary lifelong pain. The longer someone does something, the more it becomes ingrained in them, and it will be that much more difficult to turn around. So anyways, that being said, how do we deal with issues that have come up for us? Well, like I said, we try to address it quickly. My husband especially has been good at keeping both of us accountable to this, and it is helpful for me because I am not naturally one who will talk about it, or bring up an issue I have with another. I hold it in, internalize it, and it's not good. Along with addressing it, explain where you are coming from and why this action hurt you, or why it is negative, not just, I really wish you didn't leave your dirty clothes on the floor. Instead say, hey babe, I would really appreciate it if you could pick up your clothes instead of leaving them on the floor for me. It makes it difficult to keep the room clean and it kind of frustrates me. Could you do that? This is a simple example, but you get the idea. Secondly, we try to approach it in a non-negative way. By this, I mean we will affirm the other with something positive and then try to bring up the issue as more of a question rather than an accusation. A lot is to be said here for the tone of voice you use as well as the situation you bring it up in. For example, never bring up issues in a group situation. This can embarrass and humiliate your spouse and create division. Always do this in private and don't hound them about it if they've already had a tough day, unless they ask about it. I've also struggled with using the right tone of voice at times, and this can create hurt, confusion, or other emotions that aren't necessary or helpful to the other. Try to have a soft tone of voice and not one that inflects negativity, frustration, or any other such emotions. Thirdly, be understanding of where your partner is coming from. Ask them questions about where they're coming from. Show an interest in what may have caused them to act or talk a certain way. Maybe it was you. People are also shaped by their backgrounds. Things like a rough home life, neglectful parents and relatives, bullying, or various other things that happened to them in their past can create behavior patterns in that person, and they may not even realize it. Show some empathy and respect. It goes a long ways. Last but not least, after you've listened to them, explain their part and talk through it with them. Show gratitude for their willingness to listen and understand and work through this with you. Show them how much you appreciate it and acknowledge their attitude of willingness to change. If they receive it that way, of course. Alright, so after talking about how we deal with problems, we are going to branch into what was our first big problem. Let me preface this by saying often a problem is what you make it. You can blow it up and make it much bigger than it really is. Or sometimes you can downplay it to be much smaller than it really is. It is really what you make it, mostly. There's also a difference between having a major concern and having a big problem. Concern is worry about a situation. A problem is a situation that is unsatisfactory and causes difficulties for people. This is a key distinction here because you can stop a lot of concerns from becoming problems or big issues. If I or my husband have a concern about the other, we can bring it up to them and hopefully get to the root of it before it becomes a big problem. That being said, our first big problem in dating was my fault. It had to do with a specific strain of our communication. I was having trouble knowing who I was or what was going on inside. I didn't feel I had stability, and so my emotions suffered. This was causing a lot of turmoil for me. I would randomly be upset or hurt by something, and it could take me a while to actually pinpoint what it was and address it. It was frustrating not only for me, but for Ben as well. I knew I was upset, but I didn't know exactly what it was until it was drug out of me, and he asked me a lot of questions. And I didn't know how to handle it all, so I would often just clam up or shut down. This was hard. Ben would sometimes sit in minutes of silence while I couldn't even find the words to verbalize what I was feeling. He could tell I was hurting but didn't know how to help. This situation started out with a lot of frustration and feelings of helplessness on both sides. But then we just started discussing the why and how we could work it out, and what may be the root of it. This helped tremendously. I would still struggle occasionally with expression, but it now became us against it instead of me against myself and Ben. This is so important. You and your partner must recognize that it is you two with God against whatever you may be facing. As soon as it becomes you against the other, or against God, that is the very thing that divides and causes friction. You must be a threefold cord that is not easily broken. Moving up to our next stage of life, marriage. This is a whole other ballgame. You no longer have the same space you did when you were dating. You are with this person every day, and you are responsible to treat them right, respect them, and work out the issue as soon as possible, or you'll be in a real tough spot. This person is your best friend. You know what happens when you and your best friend are not on good terms? Nothing goes right. You're cranky, irritable, or sad. When they're upset, you're upset, and vice versa. Our first difficulty or problem in our married life was probably finances. We had discussed money and other related things in our dating period, but there's so many more things that come into play when you suddenly become one with this person. And you may have extremely opposite views of money or spending habits, ideas of what going into debt means to you, what money and success means to you, etc., etc., etc. The list can literally be endless. We encountered most of these growing up differently and shaped our viewpoints quite diversely. His goals for the future and how he intended to get there didn't exactly fit mine to a T. Our spending habits and the importance we placed on certain things were not aligned either, but the best thing we did was to talk through them. He shared with me what his hopes and dreams and ideals were for all of the above, and I acknowledged certain weaknesses I had that didn't fit into those, and agreed to work on them. Up until the point we discussed the finances, which wasn't that long into our marriage, it was pretty aggravating at times. I didn't live up to expectations that I didn't know about, and he was frustrated we weren't hitting goals as he had hoped. You have to communicate these goals, whether it's the husband or the wife. If you place expectations on someone and they don't know about them, how can you expect them to be met? Secondly, as a wife, and this is the hardest part for most, myself included, is that biblically you are called to be subject unto your husband. This means that his goals come first and foremost. And if you are doing something that gets in the way of those, or that he doesn't agree with or support, then you are in the wrong place. There is definitely room of opportunities like jobs and ways to make income, but only if it comes after those aspirations of your husband. The wife is not to take primary place in the household as such, unless of course there's a situation where the husband is unable to work and the Lord knows. Many women will probably not like to hear this, but what about me and my goals in life? Exactly, what about you? If you've committed to marriage, you have committed to be one with your husband and subject to him. This is not a place about me or one that can hold pride. This was a choice you had. It is no longer about you, but about us. If your husband supports you and is okay with you doing those things you want, then by all means, but he must take first priority next to the Lord. Ephesians 5:22 says, "Wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands as unto God." This is not me just speaking my opinion. This is what God says in His Word, and I can tell you that if this is not followed, there will be difficulties to follow. All this said, I again place the importance on communication. Talk about your goals, talk about your struggles, talk about your emotions, your feelings, your frustrations, your appreciation for them. For how will they know if you don't speak? Philippians 2:4 says, "Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others." This is true of the heart of marriage. Selfishness will destroy and infest your marriage. Selflessness brings love, happiness, joy, and the ability to work through problems. Let God and your spouse be your primary focus. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.